All right, well, maybe as we wait for a few more to join, why don't we just get started with some introductions? Does that sound good? And then as people filter in, they can introduce as we go. Anna, would you like to start?
Sure. My name is Anna Castengay. I live in Buffalo. I am a volunteer with USES and help put together these monthly meetings. I'm also an outreach specialist, so I'm helping with different initiatives like our video initiatives and everything. Eva, you want to go next?
Surely. So I'm Eva, Executive Director of USES. I'm happy to see some new faces here today, and I hope you guys enjoy. I think this is going to be a really, really, really good meeting today. Useful information here. I'll pass it off to Maz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maz. Most of you know me, but I work with Eva and Anna, and we just do all sorts of things for USES. I'm on the board, and I founded USES about 2 years ago based on all kinds of misinformation about solar. And now USES is really digging in with getting all the information out about solar that people really have to understand. So thank you, Eva, for taking over and making this work, and Anna for organizing these meetings. How about Mary Carroll? You're next.
Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Carroll Deering, and I live in outside of Springville, New York, in the town of Concord, which is just south of Buffalo, where Anna is. And I've been coming to these meetings probably this might be my fourth, I think. And there's a proposed solar project in my neighborhood down the road. So I found out about this after reaching out to some of the folks involved in that project, and it's just been a way for me to learn more about solar in general, and to help me stay informed so I can speak in an intelligent way to people in my community, the supporters as well as the detractors. So I'm learning a lot, and I appreciate Eva and Anna's willingness to listen to some of my thoughts. And I think that's why we're addressing this topic tonight. So thank you. And I'll pass it off to Rose.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rose. I'm also from Buffalo, New York. I am a junior fellow with New Yorkers for Clean Power, and then I recently joined as the student rep on the board for USES. And I will pass it to Harriet.
Hi, my name's Harriet Barish. I live in Westchester County in Mamaroneck. And really, I'm a volunteer with Sierra Club, but learned about your meeting really through Jeff, who's also I see on Zoom here. And I'm here to learn more about solar energy. Oh, I guess I need to pass it on. All right, Jeff.
Hi, my name is Jeff Schumann. I, like Harriet, live in Westchester County, Croton-on-Hudson, actually. Member of the Sierra Club down here. I'm here to learn what you people do. I should also mention that Sierra Club has a large-scale renewable assessment project that they work on, and I've been trained in that. So I'm somewhat familiar with how solar development works. Let's see, I can pass it on to Nick, I guess.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Nick. I'm in South Glens Falls, New York, so just outside of Saratoga. I work for Lightsource BP, which is a solar developer, and that's what brings me here. So nice to meet everyone. Oh yeah, let's see, Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason Paul. I work for JS Land Services with Todd Scott, whom many of you know. I've actually sat in on a couple of these meetings with Todd before. And I live south of Buffalo, just about on the PA border, and I'm just happy to learn more about what we're into. I've only been working in renewables for about the last 3 months, so looking forward to pick up some new information. And I'll pass it on to, let's see, who didn't go? Yeah. Joanne.
Hi, it's Joanne. I'm from Rochester, New York, but I'm sitting in the Newark terminal on my way back from 2 months in Puerto Rico. So darn, I have to come back. But I am also part of the Sierra Club as part of the Energy Committee, and also do the assessments for large-scale renewables. And I'm part of the Climate Solutions Accelerator program in the Rochester Finger Lakes region, and part of also I'm sorry. Yeah, so I'm just involved in a bunch of different stuff in the Rochester region as well. So it's good to see everybody again.
All right, with that, let's pass it to Pete and then Molly, and then I think we've covered everyone.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pete Worth. I'm from Syracuse, New York, recent board member of USES, and currently involved in a contentious, what will we call it? I guess it's a fight. Gotten a little nasty between the planning board of the town of Manlius and the town board, involving the development of a 17-acre, 12,000 panel solar farm on the town of Manlius municipal landfill. And I'll pass it off to, let's see, who is the?
Molly. Molly's our next.
Molly.
Thanks for coming, Molly.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Molly. I'm initially from Buffalo, New York, but right now I'm living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I'm an intern at USES.
Molly is doing wonders for our social media outreach, things that I could never have done on my own. So we love Molly. And then with that, Anna, do we want to kind of start jumping into things?
Yeah, sure. Could you just give me sharing?
Oh, yes, sorry.
And I'm glad that you guys mentioned the large scale renewable scorecard that Sierra Club does, because actually a portion of it is going to be our environmental and community concerns section is actually based on a lot of those topics that you guys cover in that. So overall today, what the purpose of this presentation is to kind of go through what are some ways that you can tell responsible solar development apart from other developers. So these would be good ideas for grassroots organizers or community members to bring to town hall discussions to discuss with the developer what they want for their community. This is also just some good outlines for developers to think about as they are progressing through their projects, and good things for the municipality to think about, as well as the when the project is going through siting and planning. So today we're going to start out by just making a reference to our USES Grassroots Model by Trieste. It is a model that we have available on our website that provides some guidelines for developers in doing community outreach. It's a nationally successful strategy to reach community supporters. It also provides guidelines for meeting community members, promoting action and marketing messages on the grassroots side as well. So it kind of has a developer section and a grassroots section. And today I just wanted to go over some of the components on the developer side. So some things that you should be looking out for your developer to be doing to relate to your community, or some guidelines for developers and how they want to start their relationship with their community. And some techniques that they typically would use are having a landowner dinner. And this is really critical to help landowners form alliances. So this can start before they have landowners sign leases or after, just so that they get to know each other and they get to know more about the developer, and they can feel like they are forming more of a community. Quite often, these landowners will then develop a group of their own to support the project, to do some outreach to support public opinion as well. There's also opportunity for public outreach by just collecting data on relevant parties within the community. So those include businesses, relevant environmental organizations that might want to also be supporting the project publicly. It's also great for them to table at local events like festivals or fairs to really get their information out to the public so that they know what's coming to their community and how will they be benefiting from it. They also quite often host open houses, more so when COVID was not prevalent, but hopefully more of these will be popping up where you can, they actually invite the community to, if there's a local office, to come in and they can see some of the site-specific materials. They also will try to support recruit non-landowner support. So local organizations and community leaders that can also speak to the benefits of their project. And those can be recruited at these local events, at the open house, at the public outreach events as well. They should be developing site-specific materials, which are quite frequently located on their website, but should also be distributed at these local events as well. So that can include project fact sheets. Newsletters are oftentimes available on their website, and PowerPoints to give you more information. They really should be sharing a lot of info about what they are developing, how much power they'll be developing, the number of jobs that they'll be creating, things like that. As we have more projects, we should also expect more opportunities for solar farm tours. There really aren't many active projects in New York State right now, so these aren't as common as, say, a wind farm tour or solar farms tours in other states, but this would be something that is also very beneficial if you have an active site, to be able to show people, what does that look like? What does a solar farm look like? And as always, they should always provide opportunities for and be receptive to constructive feedback from the community. And that quite often takes place at town hall meetings, which is what we want to make sure that people are prepared for and knowledgeable about what they can ask about. And Maz and Eva, before I move off from this slide, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you'd want to add about this model.
I will jump in really quick. Oh, sorry. I was just
No,
going to credit Maz. I was just going to credit Maz majorly because, I mean, as most of you know, like she seriously has made this entire model through experience, and there is a lot more detail that goes into each of these bullet points. And I do want to just remind that the model is available on our website. You just have to fill out a form, and since it's trademarked, we do have a licensing fee. And while there aren't many developers on our call right now, I just do want to say, from my personal experience, I've been really lucky to have lived some of this with Maz in Pennsylvania. And I will say, like, certain things like the landowner dinner in particular, and Maz knows about this, for me, like, it built a huge sense of camaraderie within the landowner. I almost said landlords, landowners, and just the importance of finding the relevant parties in your community profile. Maz and I have also been really lucky to find very key players in these communities that have been really huge with mobilizing support for our projects that we're working on in Pennsylvania. And so I want to shout out to Maz, because everything that she lays out here, I've pretty much gotten to be a part of so far, and it's truly gold. Maz, I'll pass it. Sorry.
I just want to say quickly, thank you, Eva, but Eva's amazing. We need to work with organizers like Eva for this model to work. So developers need to literally put some investment in the grassroots organizing so that people like the landowners and those others in the community can be held together in a way that really keeps them, informed and working that whole group connection. So it's fun, and people actually love meeting about things they care about, and they want to understand more about something that impacts their community. So this kind of work, and what everyone on this Zoom is doing, is like I think the foundation of how solar becomes a reality in communities across America. We got to talk to each other and have, readily available ways to do that. So hands down, Eva is amazing at this. And everybody on this Zoom can be amazing as well. But I'm just saying it's not rocket science, but it can be fun. And this is how USES started, with forming a group with a mission statement and all these people coming on board. And so you can do it in whatever format you want, whether it's large scale or very, very community focused. It's just organizing.
Can I ask a question? Maz, it sounds as though you are the person behind this brilliant model, so to speak. And of course, Eva, as you've said, and the others are, the ones who are getting it out there. But my curiosity is, where in Pennsylvania did this originate, and what project was involved, or projects? And did you find, I'm assuming that you found this model successful there, or maybe you put it together after a successful initiative got off the ground. I'm just curious how you came up with it.
Oh, Mary Carroll, sorry. I have my own business for 25 years, and I've been working renewable energy projects for a good 20 years. And I do this thing. It's like grassroots organizing. So I was doing this all over New York and the Northeast for the most part. So I've seen it work, and it's been very successful in many places, but it's usually this kind of stuff happens when the opposition is already organized. And if we can get ahead of it, as soon as we can get ahead of it with solar, we're going to benefit, and the opposition will go bye-bye. But they're going to be, as we're seeing in communities in Pennsylvania and New York, and wherever we go, people have the same concerns and inflated ideas about why this solar project or that isn't going to work. And it's usually because they don't want to look at it, basically. They just don't want to see it. So we got to figure out ways to get people to put down their guard, and that's what we do. And that's what we've been doing. So developers they've been hiring me as the organizer and my team to come in, just so you know. Does that help? Thanks.
Maz, this is Pete. I have a question, because you said getting ahead of it, and I think you're absolutely correct. Usually we're doing catch up. So my experience, at least in the central New York, is that the developers contact the municipality. And generally the first time that, anybody in the community finds out about it is when there's a public hearing. And once there's a public hearing, opposition, I think opposition galvanizes quicker. The solar fight that is being played out is that the municipal landfill, which has been capped for years, so it's basically a farm field. On either side of it are hills. So, as you go up the hill, people are looking down at it. It's impossible to screen all of it. So, and as you go up the hill, real estate gets more expensive. So, these are fairly affluent. One hillside, literally they're $500,000 homes looking out maybe a mile away. When you're on top of the hill, you can see forever. So how do we get ahead of it when that opposition galvanizes so quickly? Everything that you have listed here, I would assume takes a fair amount of time to put this in place. And once there's a public meeting, the opposition, it's like a wildfire. So
yes.
So how do we get ahead of it?
Well, you need a developer to get ahead of it by hiring an organizer to do this as soon as they can. I mean, as soon as they can, which is why, you know, there are some really great developers out there that get the importance of this. This is the critical issue that nobody really considers until it's an afterthought. You know, they'll consider it endangered species or wetlands and all that, but they forget about the public and how important this is to their investments. And that's the business model that a smart developer will invest in this kind of thing. And I tell you, it's tough. It's going to be a little rough road going ahead when these projects actually become a reality and you start seeing hundreds of thousands of panels in people's communities. So we've got to get the word out about why this is so important and the facts about why it's so important. And I'm sorry you have to look at it right now, but this is what's going to happen in a very positive way. That's all we can do. I mean, if we're getting ahead of it now, really, because they're the big major solar projects that are being proposed are not here yet. So that's, we got to really move fast in getting people to understand the value of solar.
But then I wonder if the key then, and I believe there are some developers on this call. I mean, I would like to hear from their perspective, you know, have they thought about and allocated resources? I mean, the masses of the world have to eat. So, you know, we all have bills to pay. So I think it's incumbent upon solar developers to allocate resources and think about, well, maybe the first, before there's any type of public hearing, because that opposition, once people in these communities on these two hillsides heard about it, boom, you know, they were sort of like poking a hornet's nest. And it's an uphill battle. I mean, there was an article in the Syracuse papers today. You know, it's gotten a little bit nasty. So I'm curious what the developers, what the feedback from the developers on the call. Hate to put them on the spot, but please speak up, folks.
Yeah, this is Nick. I'll just say that Maz and Eva are just an integral part of our team. They're just an extension of our company. This is a major focus for us. We build projects all over the country, all over the world, and a lot of these things are in our back pocket. What's on this slide right now, and this is certainly our approach. There are other solar developers out there, and there are thousands of other solar developers out there. Right. A lot of them are just subsidy hunting, or you know, they just want to get in, get out, and their history, they'll sell it and they're gone. We are one that isn't like that. We own and operate everything we do, so it's very important for us to become part of the community, because we are going to be in the community for 30 years, and then who knows what happens after the projects, maybe even longer. So this is a high priority, getting the community involved in everything we do. And as I saw this, Maz, I just started Googling the local fairs and festivals for our towns, because that's a good idea. Unfortunately, they're kind of in the middle of nowhere, so there's really nothing going on, but we'll find something. So yeah, from my perspective, Maz and Eva and their team is incredible. And I'm kind of new at LightSource, but the feedback I've gotten is that it's just a necessity. So we've got in-house resources, but we've had to go to the experts. So that's my perspective, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
And Nick, I mean, time is money. You're tying up capital, if nothing else, if you're going to allocate it towards a proposed solar farm. So how do we deal with the issue? And Maz could probably speak better than I, but I would assume that some of this outreach could take, I don't know, 6 months. I mean, to identify people that are interested and have dinner parties or whatever, you don't roll that out in 2 weeks, 4 weeks. So is that built into the time frame that, okay, you know, before there's one, you know, assessment, environmental assessment made or whatever, we're going to plan 6 months or whatever just for a local organizer to get their feet in the pool and test the temperature of the water?
Well, let me just say, I don't want to take a whole lot of time into details, Pete, but I'll just help Nick out a little bit about what I do is that we develop a strategic plan for every site. Every site's different. They all have, you know, a different set of, you know, variables to them. And if your hair's on fire as a developer and you haven't done your groundwork, finding supporters, it's going to cost them a lot more money to try to get this done in a way that's going to really help benefit their projects and protect them. So it's all up to the developer and how soon they get in. But the sooner, the sooner, you can't get in soon enough. And the thing that we're doing with USES is trying to collectively help every community out there by giving them like a base of information that they could use and tools and things developers can purchase to give to their grassroots folks. I mean, it has to be done in a really strategic way. And we're trying to build the same thing in Pennsylvania and get the Pennsylvania folks to become a chapter of USES. And wouldn't it be cool to get, you know, every state that's having projects proposed be a part of USES, and we can all build on that and use other ordinances from other states and, you know, soil management and all these things that we have to address as a whole, you know, technology base. We have to support this technology in a very strategic way. And there's attorneys that are being hired by the opposition, and they come in with guns. I mean, they are equipped. And so we've just got to find the right people out there to speak on behalf of these projects.
With that, we have a lot of other really cool slides to share today. So I think we should move forward unless there's any other pressing questions right now. And if not, you can totally reach out and I can forward you to any of the respective people that you have a question for.
I might have skipped. Nope, this is the next one. All right. So speaking of some of the fancy stuff that we got to share with developers. So this is an example of a lawn sign that USES will be putting on their website that developers can order. We are going to have different series, so they're going to be focused on the solar site having a pollinator habitat and the benefits that can come from that, or the economic benefits, the different jobs that this will provide. And the idea is that we're going to have these lawn signs that we can put in front of construction sites or the solar site as it's being developed. And it might not look pretty then, but reminding the public, having all of these signs staggered that as they drive past, they can read about the benefits, as well as having a potential avenue to learn more about solar in general at the USES website as well. So these are just kind of examples of the site materials as well. You know, you see a lot of lawn signs from opposition. We want beneficial lawn signs that'll show how we can support solar as well.
Really like that one, Anna. Where on the website? I'm browsing now.
So Nick, we don't have it on our website yet, but it is something that we're working on. We have a lot of different phrases. So for example, like pardon the disruption soon, or this solar site has created this many jobs, and, you know, kind of like a fill in the blank. And so for, say, if a developer wanted to order them through USES, then they could, but also we're thinking if grassroots organizers wanted to order them through USES, they could reach out to their respective developer to have them fund it. So shortly, whenever we get to, and we as in me, I was gonna hopefully have all the rest of the signs made by today so that we could share them, but I don't. But soon they'll be up on the website. I'm not sure exactly where they're going to be yet on the site, but I can definitely let you know once they're created, and we will do the purchasing for you and just do the transaction through USES.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, and if at any point you have any ideas of what would look really great to see on one of these signs, like any phrases or just topics, if you want to throw it in the chat, that would be very helpful for us, because we're just trying to make sure that we cover the full gamut of what can be written on these signs. And I see that Sean Grasby has arrived as well. So these are some, for those of you who don't know Sean, we can probably introduce him now. If you want to say hi, Sean, and kind of give your background.
Hello, everybody. My name's Sean Grasby. I'm a code officer in Western New York. I do inspections on several sites, work for several municipalities as well. So I just wanted to share some of the experiences I've had over the last couple of years with solar.
Yeah, so Sean was really helpful in setting up these next few slides, and just kind of recommendations of what he has from his experience. And this is really to help us guide not only developers to know what are some things you should be thinking of ahead of time, but also grassroots people. We want to keep our town hall meetings constructive. When you show up, what are some things that can be constructive to ask for your community to make sure that this developer is going to have a positive impact? So some of the ways that you can do that is to ask for more than what the bare minimum is and be as specific as possible. So if the site plan includes a vegetative border, then try to, planning boards and community members can request higher borders or specific types that they'd like to see. The landscaping plan is saying that they're going to use ryegrass. There are some moves to include pollinator friendly mixes, and that can be quite a bit more effortful and can take more time, but there are I know that USES right now is working with Ernst Seeds, that there are specific large scale manufacturers of these pollinator friendly mixes that you can go to and get some support with. The maintenance plan might offer mowing once a year or until the grass hits the bottom of the panels, but you can ask for them to mow more than 3 times or more times, like 3 to 4 times a year, or include some solar grazing animals as well. And it's really important. Visual impacts are the greatest the greatest fodder for opposition. So it's really important to consider the visual impact for those who live closest to the site as well. So some notes for the grassroots organizers. You're going to want to go and attend the initial meeting and listen to plans, but then take time to think about what you want to see, what you want to have brought to your community, and bring comments back to the planning boards after that. Many planning boards in smaller communities, it's unlikely that they have experience with solar projects, and they might not know what opportunities are available to them. So these are opportunities to kind of open their minds and start thinking more, and hold them accountable to ask for what needs to be asked for. And grassroots organizers can also attempt to meet with the developers beforehand so that they know what is going to be asked of them at the planning board meetings. And that's really important for developers to consider meeting with community members as well, too, to make sure that you can kind of feel the waters. So just kind of going over all of the topics that you would want to consider. Well, important topics to consider are the upkeep and maintenance. What does that look like? Visual impacts. And one thing that would be really beneficial is to make sure that the developer, if they're cutting down trees for the project, that they are making up for the same number of trees within their vegetative borders while making them look nice. You also want to think about construction planning. So where traffic is going and where resources are kept. How are the resources getting to the site? You want to have a road use agreement with the developer in place to make sure that their contractor knows exactly what they're looking, where to go and what to do. And it's one thing that Sean mentioned was taking a video of the road before and after construction to make sure that the maintenance on the road is being kept up. And if there is any damage, that would be taken care of, and the developer and construction and contractors would be responsible for that. And the town should always review all of the plans directly with the contractor to make sure that they are keeping all parties accountable, because sometimes the developer, they aren't the ones that are necessarily constructing the site. So it's really important that all parties are on the same page. So the other thing to consider are host agreements, and those are the essentially the agreements between the town and the developer on what the town gets for hosting the solar site. And they can include even things as specific as needing to hire a certain percentage of local labor. That is might not always be possible. But if that is included in the plan, then if they didn't meet that goal for whatever reason, the town might, the developer may then make up for that with additional funding elsewhere. So that is a big push that USES is really trying to highlight, is how economically beneficial overall solar sites are. So using local labor and using local businesses for production in any way, it's huge and can bring so many benefits to the community and can really turn that relationship into something positive. Keeping an eye on access roads are another big thing. So you want to make sure that an ambulance can get through if there's an emergency. You also want to make sure that these access roads could impact environmental concerns as well. The DEC and Army Corps of Engineers look after the wetlands, and they would find the developer and make them pay for restoration if any of that is damaged. So this is beneficial for both the developer and the community to make sure that they are aware of this and keeping an eye on it during construction and afterwards. And the DEC might expect the municipalities to actually conduct these inspections, like the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, but a lot of small communities may not have the resources to conduct these inspections. So one thing that some of these communities are doing is that they ask the developer to put up escrow to support these, to make sure that they are done thoroughly. And then making sure that an emergency response plan is in place. We have discussed in the past and in this group how important it is to get the fire department involved and aware of what measures they need to take, but also get them to be supportive of this program. A lot of fire departments, they have volunteers, they're very well established in their communities, and having these guys support a solar project can bring huge positive public support with it. So you want to make sure that the ambulance and the fire department, that they agree with the emergency response plan and that they feel comfortable being able to do it. All right. And we have a couple of pictures here that Sean has provided that kind of illustrate a lot of the stuff that we just talked about. So this is in Burns, New York. It's the only 2-room jail left on this side of Mississippi. It was built in the 1800s. And this is just an example of something that a developer can give back to the community. So the developer plans to restore and refurbish this historical landmark, and funded, you can see there's this white garage next to it. They actually funded the town's purchase of the garage next door. They're going to tear it down and they'll create a parking lot so that they can have more visitors and they can add to this historical landmark. And the parking lot will actually have charging stations from a NYSERDA grant that Sean was able to set up as well. And just ignore the 4 feet sign, something that he needed for a fire code. Another example would be that local businesses can benefit from developers renting their equipment, like this excavator. This was something from a local business that provided this. Another example is I highlighted the guy who did not want to be in this photo. So, well, he didn't want his face shown. So, but he is a local guy that is working on the site. So it's really important to highlight again that community host agreements can specify that developers should hire local labor. Here's an example of a solar farm. So the picture is taken from inside the solar farm looking out at somebody else's, the landowner's actual farm. So they rented out part of their land to the solar field. And as you can see, they have a thriving farm that is still fully intact. They have a barn there, they have a hay field. And this is just a great example of how solar doesn't necessarily take away from farmers. It's a great way for them to diversify. A lot of times these solar farms are allowing families to maintain their businesses. It really gives a lot of additional income to local farms. And it can help the local economy as well while ensuring that more locally sourced and sustainable agriculture is being utilized instead of, this farm very well could have been bought out by a big factory farm that, that really is not only dangerous to the local economy, but also to the local environment as well. And then another thing to mention is that this is wildlife fencing. So one of the big issues that opponents quite frequently have is that it's going to, impede the wildlife and the local ecosystem, but using the appropriate fencing can actually, like this fencing will allow small critters to get into the solar farm. But at the same time, we do want to make sure, because fencing is a requirement by law, that we have it high enough so that there's no animals that could try to get over it and potentially get caught. And then for this is new, so there will be vegetative screening that would cover the fence. So they wouldn't be just looking at a bare fence with solar panels from their house. This is another example. So this is two views. So one is you're standing on the mat and looking at the solar panels. The other, you're turning around and you're looking at the community next to it. So this is a 2 megawatt facility in Lakeville Villages Estates. It's a 55 and up community. The solar farm is actually owned by the community, and the facility helps offset the costs of maintenance for homes while also giving the residents a break in their utility bills. So it's a double benefit for them. And the black mat is part of the access road that is being designed for stormwater retention to prevent flooding and runoff getting into the community there. This is also a really good example of good landscaping on a solar farm. So you can see that it's a very strategically laid out vegetative border. These trees will grow and cover it up more as they get older, but it's very neat and tidy. And you can kind of see, so one of the things that the opponents quite frequently reference might be the type of fencing. If there's barbed wire, it's made to think of like the coiled barbed wire that you see around jails. You can kind of see it here. This is just very inconspicuous barbed wiring that goes along the top that would be covered by the vegetative border as well. And here's an example of wildlife that can still function within a solar farm. So it's doing what it does best, finding a way to thrive in new locations. This is a fixed panel system, which means that the solar panels do not rotate or move. With a bird nest, Sean said that this is just one picture, but he saw at least 40 nests in total in this field. And even though this is a fixed panel system, tracking panels also have stationary beams that would allow for nesting as well. So it's a great place. It keeps the nest warm, and the fence will keep the predators out. So it's a great place for bird populations to thrive. And
Anna, I think that we should give you a moment to rest really quickly. And we just got a lot of information. I feel like we should open it up for any thoughts that anybody had or anything that they wanted to discuss, just as a little beat after we got to look at all these really great photos. Or Sean, if you had anything that you wanted to add since you took all of these great photos.
I guess I would open it up for questions. If anyone has any questions on these photos.
Jeff, looks like.
Yeah, I just had more of a comment than a question. One of the things too that Joanne, you can correct me, but one of the things Sierra Club does when you talk about jobs is also making sure or trying to ensure that union wages or prevailing wages are paid as well.
Thank you.
I would just like to say, I would agree, but these slides have been really great. So are you gonna, as usual, you usually share the slides after the fact, so that maybe we can use some of this information when we're talking, and referencing it?
Yep. We'll have the slides available, and also I did send out an email beforehand. I hope you saw it, that we are recording this session, and as most of you probably know, we don't normally record them, but this is such a valuable presentation. We definitely wanted to have it available for people to go back to. So both will be available, and we do have a new web page specifically for USES now, which we didn't before. So we have some resources there, and then these couple things will also join that. Any other comments or questions on what we just looked at?
This is Pete. Is this material designed to be used by a developer in making a presentation to a town board? Or so how do people who develop this material, how do you see it being used?
I would say to use as a tool for you as a grassroots organizer, I guess, or as a developer to keep in mind. We don't want developers to be using USES specific resources for their projects, as we're not project specific focused. But yeah, I think it's just kind of like an inspiration for grassroots folks in education to understand, in what ways a developer can be responsible. And then also pictures like this one that we have here, showing that there's common concerns about wildlife disruption, and similar to the fencing that we just saw,
Yeah.
addressing a little bit of everything. Maz has her hand up. She could probably answer this better than I.
Yeah, Pete, so like everything, we're asking our developers to do the right thing, and not every developer does the right thing. So we're really good developers. We have not some great developers. And what we'd like is to use these examples as uses for them to go for it in the way that, like, plant the most appropriate trees for your fencing that you grow, and then spend the money to do that. This really matters. And that's where Sean is seeing, even though these are smaller instances, we're going to see, like I said, very large amounts of land that are going to be used for panels, and we got to get it right. We got to get it right so we can use at least. And we're going to have a scorecard, and this is exactly perfect. We're going to align with what we're trying to do at USES is provide the information for developers to consider to like bang this thing out in a way that really helps communities, as opposed to, just cut and run. And there are developers that will do that.
Would this material also, Maz, then be appropriate for, say, town boards to help them evaluate? I mean, the issue of cut and run, I mean, and I don't have a dog in this race, so to speak. I've at least in the developers that have made presentations for solar farms in Onondaga County, I never had the sense that any of them were like, you know, fit under the rubric of cut and run. The problem has been, by and large, you know, people adamantly just saying, I don't want to see it.
Right.
If I can see it, I'm opposed to it, which means that any site where there are hillsides around it. I mean, we ran into that too, private farmland that was on a hill. It was marginal farmland because it was on a hill, but because it was on a hill, people could see it. You know, it was impossible to screen. And the other issue, which has happened out in Fenner, which is in Madison County, is the question of changing the rural character of the community. There was a very large scale, I guess almost commercial size solar farm proposed. And it wasn't a really, well, it was a question of seeing it, but more in the sense that they said, gee, we're a farming community. We don't want to change that. So there was a aesthetic question.
Well, Pete, you know, actually, I worked at Fenner and we established one of the first wind farms in New York State or Eastern Mississippi. And we established through grassroots organizing the Free Center, the Fenner Renewable Energy and Education Center. And a farmer actually donated land to put a blade there to educate the public about the importance of ag land being used for renewable energy. And, you know, this is like the same story with for solar as it was for wind. And we just got to get our farm community, our ag community to back us up because they need to talk about how this is their new crop. This is how they're going to survive because these small farms are going down. And, you know, there's so much work to be done, but I'm just saying, you know, Fenner's a great example of naysayers versus, you know, people in support.
Yeah, so I mean, without mentioning names, I know some of the people that work at the Renewable Center that helped organize a ban on solar on the questions of, you know, changing the rural character. I mean, it was sort of ironic because these are some of my friends. And when I heard that they were opposing it, it was like, you're killing me. So
I just want to add that, you know, as long as the developer is doing, you know, doing all that they can, ORES is not going to accept NIMBY as an excuse to turn down a project. If that's the only thing is that people are opposed because they don't want it in their backyard, it's not going to be denied. But you just need to make sure that the developer is adhering to the rules, really working with the community, you know, working with the developer so that he knows what's important to people in the community as you have your ear to the ground, and making sure that, you know, you're following the dockets, you know, following the whole ORES process, the documents that are being submitted to ORES, and know really what ORES's requirements are, so that you can help move that project along to a successful conclusion. But, you know, ORES especially recently is focusing more on the CLCPA side of things as they take in consideration these applications and these projects. So, you know, if it's a difference between NIMBY and meeting some of these climate goals is going to, you know, it's going to take precedence over that. So, you know, even though there's a lot of talk out there, a lot of angry people about that, that is probably not, you know, going to be a deal breaker.
Well, Joanne, I think you hit the nail on the head. What we're running into is NIMBY. What I would also have to say is that the NIMBY is taking precedent over climate change mitigation. There is a reality to that, and that fight is happening all across New York State.
Yeah, I would say locally, yes, I would agree. I mean, it's happening in my area as well. But again, ORES has, you know, will be reviewing that application on the merits and whether, you know, it's been accounted for in an appropriate way.
Right. I hope you win.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is that I think NIMBY will always be a thing for everything, right? So many people don't like change. It could be, goes way beyond renewable energy. And by focusing on especially the economic benefits and keeping these conversations around the solar developer being productive and how can we get the most out of this for our community, I think that we will never change the NIMBYist minds probably, but we could potentially make a big impact into the community so that not everybody feels that way. So I think that that's the biggest thing. And I think, Pete, to your point, a lot of this stuff, the way we get out ahead of it is we have a lot of really good experiences across New York State and a lot of really like things like Mount Morris as an example. So people aren't as afraid of it coming into their community.
I would say also one other aspect is legislative.
Mhm.
Like what New York City did is they passed a law banning gas infrastructure in new development. So it's not an option whether you want it or not. And there's also a law that's proposed for the whole state to ban gas infrastructure in new development. So sometimes you just outlaw it. And depending how how much NIMBY pushback there is there with solar, that's another thing I think that, you know, we need to seriously think about is the legislative front.
Mm-hmm. And I just have one more thing that I had with this, but I would love to get Sean to just kind of talk about the community response to a lot of what's been going on in his neck of the woods. So this real quick this was actually developed in Vermont, but this is a solar site pollinator habitat scorecard. So it reviews the site's likelihood of supporting a pollinator habitat. And it also provides guidance on what species of plant to plant based on the land. So it's kind of broken down into different categories. And then down here, you see the pollinator friendly score. This is also available in our municipal toolkit on the USES website as well. But this is something that Sean has used in conjunction with his developers too. So yeah, Sean, would you want to just kind of speak to the community response to these initiatives and your experience with it?
Sure. I'm going to go backwards a little bit and address a couple concerns. One of the things I heard tonight was we're not getting out in front of this early enough, and we don't know about it until the public hearing. That developers in that municipality 4 to 5 months before that public hearing is held. What we need to do is to follow the agendas for the town and get to those meetings and see what's on that agenda. But those developers will come to the town and propose the project first. They'll look at the solar laws and there'll be a lot of conversation about it. And then once they schedule the public hearing, the application's already been submitted. That's when the public's hearing about it. But if they were to pay attention to what's on that town board's agenda, they would have known about it much long before that. So be involved with the municipal part of it would go a long ways, get you way ahead of that. So then when once this is in front of the town, going through site plan, they want all the public's comments, negative or positive. And what I tried to provide with these pictures are all positive comments that grassroots can bring to the board and say, well, yeah, birds do survive here, because you got the opposition saying you're going to kill all the grassland birds off. We can now say, well, how do you figure that? Because they're nesting here nice. And then I also see a lot of people aren't respecting the property owners that are actually doing this, like that small farm. That's why I wanted to take that picture. We're helping that farm survive by letting them diversify. We need to have that conversation, because what is those fields if that farmer fails? Getting sold off. We don't know what's going on. The other point we could bring up, okay, a big commercial farmer buys it. He's planting corn. It's heading to Medina to the ethanol plant. Really, we're not feeding people with it that they're always telling us. There's an awful lot of conversation that could be had that contradicts the opposition. But what we do have now are the pictures that we can do that with, the actual proof. So I think the biggest point I would try to make out of all of this is pay attention to the agendas of the town board, get involved in your community now so you can see what's coming up. Whether it's a solar farm or a Walgreens or a housing development, no matter what it is, just be involved. Does anybody have any questions for myself on anything?
Thank you so much, Sean.
You're welcome.
All right, so then, oh, I did have a couple more. I moved these to the end. So yeah, just to kind of wrap up what we talked about here. So it's important to note for community engagement that grassroots, this is how we can become part of this conversation. Is we need to express how solar projects can help with the environment and wildlife and how they can bring additional revenue to the town and community. A lot of these municipality leaders, they don't have this information, and this is how we can ensure that our community thrives with this. So solar projects may impact view sheds, but they can also impact town budgets in a positive way. That's one example of turning it on its head. Instead of focusing so much on this is going to look different, but it will bring in revenue. As fuel costs rise and raise town budgets, solar projects are an added income that can prevent a lot of these taxes from rising. So if you want to prevent your taxes, if you want your taxes to stay flat, this is a good way to ensure that that can happen rather than increasing it from year to year. And it's also important to note that the community host agreement payments can be individualized. They can be paid out per year with the cost of inflation included. So even though you see this sum, if it's paid out over years, it is important to note that they are accounting for inflation, or it can be paid out paid in full upfront. So for example, one of the towns that Sean works in, 3 small 5 megawatt projects right now, they just earned $42,000 for a town. He just got a $42,000 check for those 2 small projects.
Yeah. And I would just add to that, that's $42,000 a year for the next 15 years with a 2% escalator.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, way more than just 42,000. It's a consistent money maker for the town too. Yeah. So now Sierra Club members, this basically is just breaking down some of the content areas that you are looking at in your large scale renewable review scorecard. So this is some of these topics are based on the Atlantic chapter of Sierra Club, their process for endorsing projects over 25 megawatts. And it also, their commitment is to commit to renewable energy while still preserving nature and providing a just transition with respect to communities and enhancing opportunities. And that's ultimately what we want to get across as well. They use the site's application, project tour site, interviews with the developer, local stakeholders, and other residents to complete this evaluation. So it's very intensive. And this is essentially how they determine their endorsement criteria. So will they endorse a project or not? We aren't going to get too into the nitty gritty of it, but I thought that these areas were really good things for us to all be thinking about what is responsible solar really? So one of the areas is the impact to forested land. So we want to see minimal to no removal of mature forest ecosystems. Any removal of large trees are mitigated by replanting or funding nearby forest protection or vegetative borders. Impact on wetlands and riparian areas, that's another really important one that is protected by the state and the DEC as well, but we want to make sure that minimal or no impact on wetlands and riparian areas. Minor impacts would be significantly mitigated as much as possible. The impact on birds and other wildlife, we want to focus on endangered or protected species, and the project site is has little permanent environmental impact. The impact on food production and workers. So we want to see minimum impact on food production, so that really high quality farmland, significant compensation for lost revenue for those farmers if that does happen. Preferably, we would like to see co-location of agrivoltaic practices, which we've been going over a lot with our USES webinars. We discussed last month, and we discussed some of the grazing last month, and our beekeeping will be this coming month in April. Will be a webinar, and we'll be discussing that more in our FUSIS next month. We want to make sure that we're planting pollinator and or low height shade crops, which is a way that has been beneficial to maintaining agriculture in other areas. It's also important that the community is kept informed on pilot planning. Negotiations are transparent and result in an average or above average increase in money per megawatt. The local labor agreement, kind of like what Jeff said, we're trying to work with labor unions and using, paying quality wages, community engagement and listening. So you should be looking for the developer to have staff a local office as much as possible. It might not be possible right now because of COVID, but in the future, that should be something that they're trying to do. We want to see them engaging in the community, sponsoring or participating in local community events, and modifying their project based on feedback. And that's huge. So this feedback that you're bringing to these meetings, are they actually listening to it and taking it into account? It's important that the developer also assists the community with projects such as wetland habitat restoration and protecting endangered species, any historic preservation, renewable energy education, and other long-term projects. So, BOCES is starting to have a lot more renewable energy education programs. Is the developer engaging with those programs at all? And also potentially compensating payments to adjacent landowners, not just the ones that are leasing their land. And finally, I thought that this was a really good thing to think about, especially in Western New York. So the consideration of Indigenous nations. So this might be more site specific, but if a project is to encroach on land that has a strong historical significance to Indigenous people, then the developer should consider appointing an Indigenous person as a consultant and try to engage with the Native nations that will be impacted by the proposed site and mitigating any impact to any place of historical significance. Right.
Thank you, Anna. And I just want to say to all the new Sierra Club folks who joined us tonight, thank you for coming. And I know you all said a lot of you are on the team for assessing responsible development. So please feel free to add anything from your side or from your criteria. And I also just want to reiterate, as Maz said, USES is working on creating our own scorecard / more so of a checklist of criteria to look for in a developer, or a local project / criteria that we kind of expect or suggest developers to do. But yes, thank you, Sierra Club, for letting us use that information.
Yeah, and I would love to hear if you guys have any other things that you want to add as far as like what you guys look for or would expect from a developer, or your experience with using some of these evaluations.
Anna, item 1 and 4, I believe, under responsible solar practices. Food for thought. I don't remember the exact figures, but if you take a look at what an acre of solar farm, the electricity that can be produced, and how many electric cars, the mileage, etc., and if you take a look at an acre of forest, I mean, there's a very good case that we're way ahead of the game if we cut down an acre of forest. And there's also like the shrub forest, there's all types of forest. So I think I would encourage us to rethink item 1. I realize this is sort of like heresy to talk about cutting down forests, but I think also my grandmother's farm in the Catskills, 40 years ago, it was all farm fields. Today it's all grown up, it was abandoned. It's all pine forest. So anyway, so I have reservations about the way number 1 is worded.
Yeah, I would respond that, you know, reforestation is important, not just to replace what we've had before, but, you know, to capture that, but also because you know, those forests also provide a real need to the environment and to the habitat in that area. So, you know, if we don't have that environment, we don't have those trees that are native to that area and native to that ecosystem, you know, we really need that in order to continue to have the species survive that have traditionally lived there.
Yeah, and I think that the other important thing to note is I think the way that it was worded, maybe I didn't phrase it well enough, but I think minimal removal of mature forest ecosystems, but if they do need to be removed, which I think is common, right, that would replant, or that the developer would invest in reforestation in some capacity if it's not on that land.
Something that I also want to add, that, you know, another one of the many things I've learned from Maz over time, developers do not want to cut forests. It's expensive and it doesn't make sense. So in most cases, this really isn't going to apply very much. And I guess what I take from that point of the criteria is that if for whatever reason they do, and maybe they need to somehow, you know, get access to some sort of transmission line or something, that they would make up for it. But I think in most cases, they're not looking to be doing that anyways.
But even if it's not forest, I assume then it's farmland. I mean, where are these open fields that?
Oh, yes.
And item 4 also talks about food production. And I think it was Sean mentioned earlier, you know, if you're growing corn, which is going to be used for ethanol, and from what I've read recently, actually ethanol will going backwards in terms of, you know, burning carbon. It's more carbon intensive, it's not less. Can we have it both ways? Don't cut forests and don't take land for food production, and I mean, what's left?
As I think that you wanted to mention
yeah, I was like pointing, but I realized no one probably knew what it is.
I think
maybe it's a question of wording. We just need to nuance the statements a bit.
So I think USES also has to add a big thing that developers are helping. I mean, we're always on the defense here. It's like, I mean, the scorecard is really important that developers do the right thing, but they're also helping to eliminate pesticides that the typical farming community throws all over these crops, and row crops create more extensive flooding. Row crops are not necessarily great for our streams and groundwater. And so I think USES is in a position to really seriously pound out that message about row crops versus meadows. And if they're going to put like natural bee, pollinator type species of plants, that's a wonderful thing that we're improving. So I think the scorecard should really also indicate, big kudos for eliminating some of these row crops that aren't producing food. And they're, and Pete, you got it right. I mean, Kevin Campbell has that number and I love it. It's like how much an acre of land that you grow in corn versus an acre of land for solar. Where are we going to go with our vehicles with that acre of land? So let's really do the research on this and do the actual comparisons. And the pesticide thing needs to be addressed. And I'm a big toxic waste. I mean, like the reason why I'm involved in this whole renewable energy thing is because of toxic waste. And we're just ignoring that. And I think we need to really pump up that message as USES. We can do that. Eliminate pesticides. I mean, there are going to be pesticides used at solar farms, but very minimal compared to what's being used now, herbicides and pesticides. I rest my case.
I want to follow up on that because I think that there's some potential outside of eliminating row crops, something that ties into that where my husband's looking at me, he doesn't realize I'm on a meeting. Where a lot of the soil, this is, Genesee Road project that I'm assuming we're talking about. I jumped on a little late here, but one of the things to consider is that the soil types here in Southwest New York are variable. We have some soil types that are really amazing for producing row crops like soybeans and corn, but also vegetables. We also have soils here that are poorly drained, that are gravel. They don't hold a lot of nutrition anyway, and you're eking out a very small living on soil that might be better in another use, like a meadow or a pasture. And then if you can combine that with agrivoltaics, so putting something like sheep or pollinators on that site as well to make a different income, that might end up being more productive for the landowner than trying to eke out an income from land that doesn't want to produce for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think what Amy just said is it's complicated, and I think we need to be careful with the language we're using. I mean, what Amy said really resonated with me. And my grandmother's farm, I can tell you right now, in Greene County, it was really marginal farmland. The type of farmland today, you couldn't make it. Grandma and grandpa had a boarding house, and that's basically how they survived.
Yeah, thank you for that input, Amy. Maz, is this a new hand or is that your old hand that was raised? Okay, take it, it's the old hand. Does anybody else have any comments or questions?